From Washington, D.C., this is Middle East Focus. Hello, I'm Kate Seelye, Senior Vice President at the Middle East Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to today's episode about Saudi Arabia's Valley of the Arts, known as Wadi Al Fann in Arabic. Wadi Al Fann is a global cultural destination in northwest Saudi Arabia. It will feature large-scale, site-specific commissions from leading artists embedded in the spectacular red rock landscape of AlUla. The initial 5 commissions, unveiling in 2024, will be situated on a site spanning 65 square kilometers in an area famous for also being home to many ancient civilizations, including the Nabateans. This era-defining art will be in dialogue not only with the spectacular landscape, but also the area's heritage sites and ancient cultures, creating a bridge between antiquity and modernity. Wadi Al Fann also offers opportunities for the local community of AlUla to grow their economy, given new jobs in art, culture, and heritage. And I should note that this is all being developed by the Royal Commission for AlUla, which we'll refer to as the RCU, as part of a broader effort to develop AlUla as a global arts, culture, and heritage destination. Wadi Al Fann is just one of several major arts initiatives in AlUla in the works. Others include a contemporary art museum, which will be one of the few places that will put art from the Arab region at the core of its collection. This is a brief background, and here to talk to us about Wadi Al Fann, its vision, the commissioned artist, and its anticipated impact locally and globally are 2 key participants. Iwona Blazwick is the lead curator for Wadi Al Fann and chairs the RCU's Public Art Expert Panel. Iwona also heads the curatorial streams for Arts AlUla's Contemporary Art Museum. She was formerly director of the Whitechapel Gallery in London for nearly 20 years and has also held roles at the Tate Modern and London's Institute of Contemporary Arts. Manal Al Dowayan is one of the leading artists in Saudi Arabia whose work has long interrogated the gender-biased customs that impact the condition of women in Saudi Arabia. Her work is shown at the Venice Biennale, at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the British Museum, and just this week she staged a participatory performance at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. And I'm so sorry I missed it, Manal. Welcome to you both. Iwona, I want to start with you as the curator for Wadi Al Fann. What's the vision for Wadi Al Fann? What is its significance? And what did you find so compelling about this project that you left one of London's best-known galleries to become the lead curator?
Thank you very much. First of all, I should say that the Wadi Al Fann commissions are a collaborative project where lots of different curatorial expertise has informed the choice of artists and the evolution of the project, including the Alan Schwartzman group from New York and our own expert panel of curators who have spent their careers dedicated to putting art in the public realm. Really, the desert itself is the biggest draw for this project, and the caliber and potential of the artists coming together into this extraordinary environment, because this kind of work draws on a legacy of land art which developed, as we know, in the 1960s and 70s, in Europe, but also primarily in America, with artists who wanted to leave behind the city, capitalism, the marketplace, the institutions, and find freedom of expression in the vast expanses of the southwestern deserts of America. And we have some of those pioneers involved in Wadi Al Fann, namely Agnes Denis, Michael Heiser, and James Turrell, all great American artists who have made art, sculpture itself into a kind of environment, an atmosphere, an experiential and immersive space. The reason that I couldn't resist the invitation to come was because, as a lifelong desert groupie, I realized that this was a landscape such as I'd never seen before. It was once under the Red Sea, and it has these huge towering sandstone cliffs with filigree patterns on them, which perhaps were made by coral. And they are inscribed with rock art, with petroglyphs. They're rich with traces of human history. They're also the site of the great Nabatean monuments, where the Nabateans, who were great traders, welcoming civilizations from the Phoenicians and the Egyptians to the Persians and the ancient Greeks and Romans, they made their mark by building buildings, not by constructing them from the sand, but by carving them from the rocks. So we're in a very unique environment where there's ancient heritage in dialogue with a new contemporary future through the agency of contemporary artists.
So can you talk a little bit about the 5 artists and what they were asked to respond to with this commission?
All 5 artists had a track record of, if you like, site-specific work. And I'll start with the American artist Agnes Denis, who came to prominence in the late 1970s with an amazing work in Battery Park City, right next to Wall Street, where she planted and grew and harvested a field of wheat. And it was her statement about the necessity of real nourishment from wheat, not money. So her work makes sculpture into something generative. It grows over time. And she's made amazing projects where she's planted entire forests, but always according to geometric principles. And Denis will be using a form that has occupied her throughout her career, which is the pyramid. And she'll be creating floating pyramids that will scud across the surface of a canyon. On either side of these wonderful cliff faces, she'll be inscribing in beautiful, delicate filigree these fleeting forms of gigantic monuments. Manal Al Dowayan, I think one of Saudi Arabia's most important and exciting artists, whose work I began to know through an amazing piece called Sidelines, which was a piece making an architectonic space, which is soft, it's in a spiral, and it's actually made out of woven fibres, woven through the skills of Bedouin women. She clearly has a capacity to create immersive environments and had already had experience of working in Wadi Al Fann as part of Desert X, where she made locals and visitors alike fly through the air. And I'm sure she'll say something more about that project, but she wants to respond to another remarkable part of this landscape, which is in the oasis. AlUla is the site of an ancient settlement built 900 years ago, still standing, where people lived without electricity till 1980, and it's made of mud. And this beautiful labyrinthine settlement is going to be the inspiration for, if you like, a doppelganger of this settlement in the desert, but bearing stories, the stories of people who lived there or their memories of that, and their experience of living and working in AlUla. Michael Heiser, who is recognised as really one of the great pioneers of land art, and who's been working for 40 years on creating a work which was recently unveiled to the public called City, arguably the largest sculpture in the world. It's in Nevada. And even though it's just been finished, it looks like something from Mayan civilization. It looks like an ancient settlement. And it's a vast space made of geometric forms, which takes you on a journey. He'll be drawing on his childhood experiences of exploring rock faces with his father, who's an archaeologist. And he's very drawn by the petroglyphs that human beings once inscribed into the stone. What were they? Were they signs? Were they symbols? Were they addressed to deities? And he'll be making a series of petroglyphs at a vast scale, again in a canyon that will take us on a journey through these signs which are both abstract and somehow resonant. Ahmed Matter is a Saudi Arabian artist who first trained as a doctor, and he's always had this immersion, I think, in both science and art. And he takes us into the realm of myth and literature and poetry with his idea for creating a mirage. And he'll be submerging an ocular space in the desert floor and using principles that go back to centuries, to the thinking of one Arabic philosopher and mathematician, Ibn Haytham, whose Book of Optics was the first to identify, first of all, the way that light travels through space, the way that optical instruments can be designed and built, and the fact that we see light not with our eyes, but with our brains. So his genius resonates through the centuries to this mirage that Ahmed Matter will create in the desert. And finally, the American artist James Turrell, whose reputation globally rests in his extraordinary use of light and colour. And he will be building a sky chamber in the desert where we'll enter through a dark tunnel and emerge into a chamber which is full of light. And by framing the sky, he creates an intensity of perception of the changing conditions of light as sunrise moves through the day into sunset.
So what do you think drew artists of this caliber to this project, to Wadi Al Fann?
I think the vastness of this desert, its proximity to these ancient civilizations, the sense of light and space, the wind, it's a very, very intense evocation of the earth. And we're surrounded everywhere by deep time, the deep time of geology. So this is as far as you could get from a white cube. And I think it was irresistible.
Interesting. Thank you. Manal, as one of the 5 artists, as one of the 2 Saudi artists participating in Wadi Al Fann, what drew you to this project and how does it build upon your previous practice?
Well, I had originally built an artwork in AlUla in 2020 as part of a smaller land art project called Desert X, which was meant to be temporary, but my work was made permanent after the Desert X. And when I had arrived for making that artwork, I had never been to AlUla. I had little understanding of the archaeology and the geology and the people. But after living there for a while, in order to realize that work, and I've been back now many, many times, I've created a very, very deep relationship with the space and the people. First of all, for me as a Saudi citizen growing up, I never was taught in school this history. And so I've now come face to face with a new narrative that I fall right at the heart of. I'm going through now a big reassessment of what is my place within human history, thanks to the Nabateans, the Dadanites, and the Lahyans, who are basically maybe my ancestors. And so when the Royal Commission of AlUla invited me to make this work, I jumped on it. I took it as an amazing opportunity to actually reassess what I did even the first time around. I did build a participatory artwork called Now You See Me, Now You Don't, which is a series of 13 trampolines placed in the middle of a canyon. The trampolines reflect a concept that I thought would suit this moment in time where we are looking at the environment as artists working within the land. And so I started looking at water use, scarcity in AlUla. And I realized that when rain falls, there are huge puddles that form, or lakes, if you want to call them, but they only last for a few hours because the underwater reserves have been depleted over hundreds of years of absolutely bad usage of water by humans. And so the artwork that I installed through the trampolines speaks in the voice of the humble puddle of AlUla, where it says to us humans, now you see me, now you don't. But today, the new work that I'm working on, that's right now in research phase, so it's not really clear, it does not have a conclusion, but it will definitely be a participatory work that will engage the community, where I collect from the AlUla people their personal narratives. They are actually sitting in the middle of a city that is a heritage site with inscriptions of the Dadanites talking about their deities, their gods, their money transactions, their wives' names, their kids' names. But the custodians of this place today are the people of AlUla.
And you asked them to tell their stories for your installation. Yes, hence the name Oasis of Stories.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. What were the environmental considerations you had in creating this work that's meant to last hundreds of years?
So I have been looking at what it means to take over this beautiful, untouched space. And for me, I could not just approach it with the brutality of excavating it and pouring concrete and putting metal into the heart of the sand. Instead, I am working very hard in synergy with other very talented people like architects, scientists, other artists, environmentalists, and sustainability experts. and we are trying. So technology has not created anything yet, or science has not actually given me a solution yet, but we're getting there. I have built a collaboration with KAUST University, which is King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. And we are researching ideas around waste from desalination. And how can we turn the waste from desalination, which is salt brine, into the glue agent that you put within concrete? Because once you put that into the concrete and it cures, it actually absorbs carbon. This is the concept.
Oh, interesting. Because you're creating a labyrinth of walls.
Yeah, the artwork itself, Oasis of Stories, is based on the old town of AlUla, which is the last inhabited place in the city of AlUla. And it is a city built out of mud walls, and mud walls eventually will disappear if humans are not living among them and maintaining them on a daily basis. And so I love the idea of making visible what is destined to be invisible. And so I decided to take parts of the city, not all of it, but only the south-north facing walls, and using the labyrinth that the little old town of AlUla has. Now, this labyrinth exists because it is a security system for the townspeople. So if you're somebody that is a stranger and you go into the old town of AlUla, you will be recognized because you will definitely get lost. And so I'm using the same alleyways and pathways of walking to create also a way of moving through the artwork. But as you walk through the artwork, you will face different kinds of walls, structures that will have engravings of drawings made by the people of AlUla. So you're encountering your own culture, your own history, and your own narratives and stories within this artwork. And I've always walked around AlUla for the past year telling everybody there that this artwork is dedicated to them and their legacy.
That's beautiful. I cannot wait to engage with it. Iwona, talk about Wadi Al Fann's greater role in kind of raising awareness about building cross-cultural relationships, about engaging with the environment through art, about creating a dialogue between the present and the past. I mean, it's so symbolic in so many ways. Maybe address the significance of the kind of work Manal is doing.
Yeah, in 500 BCE, it was hopping in AlUla. There were many, many cultures that were pouring through, and it was always this cross-cultural cosmopolitan centre until really the recent past. And what this project does is it brings back that energy and that cross-fertilization by attracting artists from all over the world, but at the same time making visible artists from the region who've really been marginalized by dominant hegemonies in Western art history. So I think it has many, many important roles to play. Just as women were basically invisible from the history of art for 2,000 years, so non-Western cultures have also not been recognized. And I think this project shows how developed, how sophisticated, and how globally relevant art from the region is. But it also shows us a piece of a landscape that has traditionally been regarded as wasteland, empty, barren, dead. And it shows how full of life it is, and how not only is it full of history, but also full of potential for the future. We know that Saudi Arabia is liberalizing, and it has been, in a way, sort of dormant, I think. There have been many great artists there, but they've not been able to work in a visible way. And also Saudi Arabia is only just now developing the infrastructure that's required for an art world. We know we need an ecosystem which goes all the way from art school to incubator spaces to museums. And I think Wadi Al Fann is going to play a seminal role in that. We're going to bring people into a relationship with what is also a very fragile environment, but it's an environment which the rest of the world is moving towards, which is desertification. And if we learn from Wadi Al Fann and from the artists what they're doing, this could give us a key to sustainability in the future. The other part of this is that we are inviting artists to give masterclasses so that everybody who lives and works within AlUla has the opportunity, if they wish, to meet them, to learn the genesis of a work of art so that they might become fabricators or event managers or educators or artists. And that is the ultimate goal, is to kind of inspire creativity from a region which is very rural, which has been very isolated, kind of abandoned, and give the young people there in particular the hope of that potential of self-realization.
Yes, it is such an amazing incubator for the arts. Manal, you've been involved in the art scene for some time now. How is Wadi Al Fann shaping the art scene in Saudi Arabia?
I started making art about 20 years ago. And back then, there was Dubai. Dubai had the gallery scene, Dubai had the art fairs, and a biennale. And after 10 years of being in Dubai, I was also part of a very underground, quiet movement of contemporary art happening in Saudi Arabia. And the art coming out of my country was really exciting, really interesting, very close to the language of the youth, which is the majority of our population is in that age group. And community-led initiatives were also very interesting spaces for artists to, first of all, interact with patrons, collectors, fabricators, curators. And one example of that is 2139, which was led by the community of Jeddah. Families put up money. They were sweeping the floors as we were hanging our art in those days. And this was our only sort of institutional platform, maybe we can call it, because it's non-commercial. And we had 1 or 2 commercial galleries. We were doing our own events in artists' homes, projections of films in swimming pools, emptied out, obviously. And so there was a really rich language and debate around art. But then Saudi Arabia transformed, a big investment and focus came in to support the language of art, the community of art. And Royal Commission of AlUla is one of those. So it's not the only initiative. And now there is a huge demand from the general public, because before we used to do it in spaces and it was kept sort of within the arts community. So we all know each other. We all know what to expect to see. But now it's gone out to the public sphere. And this is a moment when the Diriyah Biennale opened, when the Islamic Biennale opened, and you see hundreds and thousands of people coming in, curious, asking questions, completely engaged with the art and recognizing the artists. It fascinates me when I go around the country and people know who I am. I'm like, do you care? Do you care what I'm doing and what I'm making? And then AlUla came, and that was a completely different challenge. It was not within the walls. So you're not making art inside a building where you can just, get a hammer and a nail and do your thing. It was challenging, but also very exciting, because you are facing your own environment, being outside, being quiet and listening to what nature is saying to you, and then having the challenge of making something that is spectacular, competing with Mother Nature, which is 100 times more spectacular than any artwork can ever be, was exciting. The challenge makes it even more fun. And so I find that a lot of artists are watching right now. It's just beginning. I think the artists that are working currently in land art and art that is meant to sit outdoors, we have a huge responsibility of setting the standard of how do you treat the environment that you're working with? What do you do with your materials? How do you think about your footprint, even with travel, even with where you live and the plastic bottles that you use? It becomes very sensitive because you really understand the delicate ecosystem that you belong to. And how will your art protect it, highlight it, and make the people that visit it feel the same way?
Amazing. Iwona, so finally, in conclusion, what's next? When will these 5 commissioned pieces be unveiled, and what follows that?
Each individual work has its own complexities, And so we're hoping that over the next 2 years, they will start growing in the desert. And then I work with an expert panel, and we've now identified 5 further artists to invite them to come and start thinking about what they might do. We've got 65 square kilometres. And one of the things that we want to do is make sure that each work has its own space, that it's singular, and that it's not like a sculpture park. Each one will have its own integrity. But there's lots of space, and we will be, hopefully by 2030, I think we hope to have at least 15 major works complete and ready for people to explore.
Very exciting, and I'm sure the world is going to respond very positively, and I hope to be there for the unveiling of the first 5. Thank you so much, Iwona. Thank you, Manal. That's all the time we have this week, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in and to our production team for all of their work on this week's episode. You can find our latest coverage of regional developments on our website at www.mei.edu. And you can follow MEI on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and subscribe to our email newsletters for the latest analysis and information about upcoming events. I'm Kate Seelye. We'll see you all next week. This has been a presentation of the Middle East Institute. To support MEI's programs and podcasts, please donate at www.mei.edu. Thank you for your support.